That's what she
in
brought
her
to Daisy.
eyes, something's off.
She looked like a soldier.
Something's off with her.
No, it's good.
What about
You ever watch a show so hyped, so highly praised that you expect greatness, only to be completely let down when it counts most? That's exactly what happened with The Last of Us. And Joe Rogan isn't staying quiet about it. In fact, he's been one of the only big names willing to call out the obvious. The show didn't fall apart because of its story or even because of the usual Hollywood politics. It crumbled because of Bella Ramsey. And after seeing how everything played out, it's hard to disagree.
Because Ellie still looks and acts like a 14-year-old from season 1, even though she's supposed to be 19.
I'm sorry. That was acting. That's what that was. I don't really care what happens with this movie. I really hope her career is pretty much over. I'd be thrilled to see that. I can't imagine. I mean, Christian, you tell me.
Joel, I think I found something.
Whoa!
What?
No, nothing. It's just your forehead seems bigger than last season.
I think I found a way through.
Like most people, I liked the first season. I thought they did a great job. Season 2, I was skeptical on them not recasting Ellie and keeping Bella Ramsey as Ellie because it's supposed to take place 5 years into the future, but obviously Bella Ramsey in real life was not going to age that much in, the 2 years it took between seasons. So in the show, Ellie still looks exactly the same, but is supposed to be 5 years older. Also, Ellie still acts exactly the same.
Joe Rogan recently unloaded on the disaster surrounding The Last of Us and didn't mince words. He pinpointed Bella as the root of the show's downfall and dissected how she turned one of HBO's most promising shows into a full-blown cautionary tale. Bella went from praised newcomer to public problem, and Joe, he broke it all down step by step. Back when season 1 dropped, people were thrilled. The show nailed the tone, the cinematography, the emotion. Pedro Pascal was on fire, and even Bella, who many were skeptical about at first, won over some hearts with her season 1 performance. But instead of riding that momentum with humility, she let it go to her head. That's where Joe started his takedown. Right at the moment, Bella stopped listening and started assuming she could do no wrong. According to Joe, Bella didn't just mishandle the role, she ignored what made Ellie so powerful in the first place. Rather than studying the character's evolution, she imposed her own vision, one that didn't resonate with the people who had followed Ellie's journey for years. Joe called it a classic example of an actor putting themselves before the part. And with someone as emotionally complex as Ellie, that disconnect showed up on screen fast. Joe also took aim at the disastrous press tour that followed. Bella hit the media circuit with an air of overconfidence. She made dismissive remarks about the criticism, accused viewers of misunderstanding the deeper themes, and pushed the idea that anyone who didn't like her portrayal simply lacked insight. Rogan tore that apart, saying, "You're playing a beloved character. You don't get to insult the audience just because they expected more." What made things worse, Joe said, was that Bella wasn't just clashing with fans, she was also at odds with the production team. Leaks revealed constant tension behind the scenes. She reportedly pushed back on major creative decisions, questioned storylines, and skipped rehearsals. Joe pointed out that this kind of behavior, especially from someone so early in their career, is a huge red flag. "You haven't earned that kind of pull yet," he said, "and when you act like you have, the whole thing falls apart." And fall apart it did. Season 2 premiered to a divided audience. Ratings plummeted, social media backlash reached a fever pitch. What had once been HBO's most promising new series now looked like a PR nightmare. Fans, even those who had defended Bella early on, began voicing their frustrations. They weren't just criticizing the story, they were zeroing in on her performance, her attitude, and the way she carried herself off screen. Joe made it clear that this wasn't a random collapse. It was the result of a pattern, a steady decline in self-awareness. Bella's refusal to engage with fans respectfully, her tendency to frame all criticism as ignorance, and her apparent belief that the role was hers to reshape entirely. Joe said that kind of mindset is poison to any show, especially one built on a legacy as emotional and beloved as The Last of Us. One of the most shocking parts of Joe's breakdown was how HBO handled the situation. At first, they tried to protect her, but as the backlash intensified and the numbers dropped, the studio went silent. Bella was pulled from interviews, press stops were canceled, her presence at major events disappeared. Joe said it was clear damage control. They were phasing her out without making it official, he explained, because even HBO knew she was becoming the face of failure. And then came the ultimate confirmation. The Last of Us Season 3 was canceled. No teaser, no press release, just gone. Joe didn't even sound surprised. He said, "When your lead becomes the biggest controversy, there's nowhere else to go." He wasn't wrong. The entire franchise had been built around Ellie, and with Bella in that role, continuing the show meant dragging the backlash along for the ride. Joe also pointed out that Bella didn't help her case when things got tough. Instead of stepping up and addressing the backlash with humility, she disappeared. Her social media went dark. No statements, no thank yous, not even a goodbye to fans. Joe mocked the radio silence, saying, "You don't vanish after something that big unless you know you messed up. Inazimaiza's warrior will worry mas per sure." And as the weeks turned into months, Bella's absence became more telling. Cast members began quietly unfollowing her. Media outlets stopped mentioning her in upcoming projects. Even Pedro Pascal, who had once spoken highly of her, avoided naming her in recent interviews. Joe called it a total industry freeze-out, a silent but unmistakable way of saying we're done. But the fallout didn't stop with Bella. Joe highlighted how the show's collapse hurt the entire Last of Us brand. He also addressed how this situation exposed a deeper issue in modern entertainment, the growing divide between creators and audiences. Joe argued that actors like Bella, who refuse to engage with fans in good faith, are part of a larger problem. You're not above the white year, you're above the people watching you, but the people watching, and he said, they make or break you. In Bella's case, the audience made her, and they had no problem walking away when she stopped listening. Joe then used Bella's situation as a warning to other young actors. He explained that success can be fleeting if you don't stay grounded. It's not about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about understanding your place in the story, he said. Bella forgot that. She believed she was untouchable. And Hollywood reminded her that nobody is. And the fans, they moved on. Some returned to the video games, others found new shows to support, but one thing was clear. Very few were asking for Bella to come back. In fact, most were relieved when the news of her quiet removal surfaced. Joe pointed out how rare that is. Usually when a show gets canceled, fans rally to save it, he said. This time, people said good riddance. Joe wasn't alone either. His segment went viral. Fans, critics, and even entertainment insiders praised him for saying what others wouldn't. Articles started popping up with headlines like Joe Rogan exposes the truth about The Last of Us collapse, and Bella Ramsey's Hollywood freeze out what went wrong. It was no longer just fan speculation, it had become the industry consensus. And what about Bella? Still silent, still gone. No new roles, no new projects, just whispers. Her team released a vague statement about focusing on personal well-being, but Joe wasn't buying it. You focus on yourself when you know the spotlight's off, he said. This isn't a break. This is exile. Joe ended his rant with a message that felt aimed at the entire industry. Stop treating criticism like an attack. Stop pretending fans owe you praise. And stop letting ego ruin good stories. He didn't need to name Bella again. By that point, everyone knew who he meant. The Last of Us could have been the next great TV saga. It had the foundation, it had the fan base, it even had the benefit of hindsight from other failed game adaptations. But one thing it couldn't overcome was a lead actress who lost the room. Bella Ramsey had a chance to own the role of a lifetime. Instead, she became the reason the show got shelved. Joe's words weren't just harsh, they were honest. And in an industry filled with spin and empty praise, that honesty hit harder than anything else. He didn't attack her as a person, he attacked her choices, her attitude, her approach. And in doing so, he gave a voice to the millions of fans who had been sidelined by the show's direction. So where does that leave things now? The Last of Us is done, Bella's career is on pause, HBO has wiped its hands clean, and Joe Rogan once again has stepped into the chaos and said the thing everyone else was too scared to admit. Sometimes it's not the story or the script, sometimes it's just the actor, and in this case it was Bella Ramsey. In the weeks that followed Joe Rogan's takedown, the entertainment world began to reckon with what had happened to The Last of Us. What was once seen as the crown jewel of game-to-screen adaptations had now become a textbook example of how quickly success can unravel when the wrong voice takes center stage. And Bella Ramsey? She was no longer just a miscast lead, she was a symbol of unchecked ego, of what happens when attitude outweighs accountability. Joe wasn't the only one speaking up anymore. Other podcast hosts began chiming in, echoing many of the same sentiments. Entertainment analysts started using Bella's fall from grace as a discussion point on talk shows. One roundtable on a popular streaming commentary show even featured a segment titled, "Did Bella Ramsey Sink The Last of Us?" The panel didn't hold back. One critic described her as the face of a missed opportunity, while another said, she wasn't cast into greatness, she walked into it and didn't know what to do with it. The conversation quickly spread to YouTube, with creators uploading long-form breakdowns of everything that went wrong. Clips from Bella's press tour resurfaced and were analyzed not as entertainment but as evidence. The once endearing spontaneity now looked rehearsed, even smug. The once celebrated boldness now came across as dismissive and disconnected. People weren't just disappointed anymore, they were fed up. Joe Rogan's original comments were quoted across platforms, and his words became something of a rallying cry. The phrase, "you're not bigger than the story," showed up in comments, thumbnails, and even merch made by frustrated fans. It wasn't just a critique of Bella, it was a reminder to Hollywood that when you alienate the core audience, there's no clever PR strategy that can save you. Meanwhile, HBO quietly tried to pivot. Executives pushed forward new projects, hoping to bury The Last of Us debacle under fresh headlines. But that didn't work. The void left by the canceled third season kept dragging people back to the central issue. How could a show with that much promise go down so fast? And each time that question came up, Bella's name was right there at the center of it. Joe Rogan picked the conversation back up on another episode. He revisited the topic, this time zooming in on what he called the silent meltdown of a studio. He pointed out that HBO had invested millions in a franchise they thought would run for years. They had mapped out future story arcs, merchandise deals, international rollouts, all of it gone. "You don't scrap that much money unless something's seriously broken," he said. And in this case, it was the person out front. He dug into the ripple effects of Bella's collapse. Showrunners began distancing themselves. Casting directors started reconsidering the risks of pairing fresh, untested actors with legacy characters. Joe emphasized that this wasn't about age or experience. It was about attitude. When your first instinct is to lecture the fans instead of listening to them, you're asking for trouble. What made things worse, Rogan noted, was how Bella's silence stretched on. No statement, no apology, no attempt to clear the air. She simply vanished. Joe called it the most deafening exit in recent memory. Normally, actors part ways with dignity. They thank the fans, release a heartfelt post, and move forward. But Bella offered nothing. That absence, Joe said, confirmed everything people had been saying, that she wasn't prepared for the weight of the role and refused to admit it. The longer she stayed quiet, the more speculation grew. Some believed she was being kept out of the spotlight intentionally. Others suggested she was laying low, hoping the storm would pass. But every day she stayed silent. The story grew stronger without her. Fans had already written the ending, and it wasn't flattering. In their eyes, Bella didn't just drop the ball. She fumbled it, ignored it, then walked off the field pretending it wasn't her problem. Industry insiders started weighing in too. An anonymous casting director told a trade outlet that Bella was radioactive right now. Stand and see through. Another executive said, "You can't build a franchise around someone who won't show up when things go sideways." Those comments were a death sentence for future roles. Hollywood runs on image, and right now, Bella's image was crumbling. Joe also talked about what this means for other adaptations. "Studios are going to be extra cautious now," he said. "If they see even a whiff of ego or arrogance, they'll think twice." He predicted that big franchises will be slower to trust new faces unless they've proven themselves off-screen as well as on. Bella had proven she could perform under ideal conditions, but under pressure, she folded. And that lesson won't be forgotten anytime soon. As more voices joined the conversation, the consensus grew stronger. Bella's fall wasn't a mystery. It was a slow, predictable decline marked by arrogance, detachment, and a refusal to take responsibility. She had the role of a generation, and instead of protecting it, she used it as a platform to scold the very people she was supposed to connect with. Joe summed it up bluntly. You can't call people clueless and expect them to support you. That's not how this works. And then, almost out of nowhere, a new rumor started circulating. A leak from a studio insider claimed that Bella had been considered for another major franchise but was dropped after internal discussions raised concerns. The reason? Audience trust. Focus groups reportedly reacted negatively to her name, saying they wouldn't support a series fronted by someone who had already burned the bridge with viewers. That was the nail in the coffin. Joe responded to the leak with brutal honesty. That's what happens when you lose a credibility, he said. You can't act like the audience doesn't matter and expect Hollywood to hand you another chance. His viewers agreed. The comment sections were filled with support. Joe's the only one telling the truth. Bella thought she was untouchable. Now she's invisible. In a world where content moves fast and headlines change daily, Bella Ramsey's disappearance has remained eerily consistent. She hasn't resurfaced, she hasn't rebooted her brand, she hasn't shown growth, and while silence can sometimes be a sign of reflection, in Bella's case, it's been seen as avoidance. Rogan closed one of his latest segments with a powerful thought. If you're given the lead role in a show like The Last of Us, you don't just represent the character, you represent the fans, the creators, and the legacy of the story. If you forget that, the whole thing collapses. And that's exactly what happened here. The sad part, he admitted, is that it didn't have to end this way. Bella could have adjusted. She could have responded with humility. She could have grown with the role instead of outgrowing her welcome, but she didn't. And now she's become a lesson for every studio executive, every casting agent, and every young actor stepping into the spotlight. Talent may get you noticed, but humility is what keeps you there. As the dust continues to settle, The Last of Us stands as a warning. A show that had everything: momentum, acclaim, a passionate fan base, lost it all because its lead lost touch. Joe Rogan didn't just call it out, he captured the frustration of an entire community. And whether Bella returns or not, her name will forever be linked with the collapse of something that could have been legendary.